Today, we're diving into one of the most explosive ideas in all of history, straight from John Locke's two treatises of government. This is the book that really provided the intellectual gunpowder for revolutions, all by asking a question that's so basic, so fundamental, we often forget to even think about it.
So let me ask you, are you born free, or are you born belonging to someone else? A subject, a servant, maybe a subordinate? Seriously, your answer to that question shapes pretty much everything you believe about power, your rights, and what a government should even be.
You see, back in Locke's day, the standard answer, the one pushed by guys like Sir Robert Filmer, was simple. You were born a subject. End of story. Power came from God, was handed to Adam, and then trickled down through a long line of kings. You had zero say in it. But then Locke comes along and just flips the entire script on its head. He argued that no, you are born perfectly free, and any power anyone has over you has to come from you, from the people. To really get how revolutionary this was, we first have to look at the idea he completely tore down.
Okay, so to build his case, Locke first had to absolutely demolish the old one, this deeply rooted idea that kings ruled by God's will alone. You know it as the divine right of kings.
Filmer's whole argument was basically that all of humanity was Adam's property, and that this ownership, this absolute power, just got passed down from heir to heir, meaning to the kings of the day. So in his world, to be born was to be born a slave. It was just the natural way of things.
Locke read this and, well, to put it mildly, he was not impressed. He called Filmer's entire argument nothing but a rope of sand, which is just a brilliant metaphor. I mean, think about it. A rope of sand looks like a rope, but the second you try to pull on it, the second you try to use it for anything, it just completely falls apart. And that's exactly how Locke saw this divine right theory. It looked strong, but under the slightest bit of pressure, it just crumbled into nothing.
And he dismantled it with two really simple points. First off, he asked, okay, who is Adam's actual heir? I mean, we're talking thousands of years. There's no clear line. It's impossible to know. And second, he said, even if you could find the heir, how does the kind of authority a father has over his kid suddenly turn into absolute political power over an entire country? They're two totally different things. The whole theory just collapses.
So, with the myth of divine right totally demolished, Locke needed a new place to start. If we aren't born as subjects, then what are we born as? And this brings us to one of his most famous ideas, the state of nature.
For Locke, before there was any government, humanity lived in a state of perfect freedom. Everybody was equal. Nobody had a natural right to rule over anybody else. It's a world with no bosses, no kings, but here's the kicker. It's also a world with no police. The only thing guiding you was what Locke called the law of nature, which is really just reason. And reason tells us that since we're all equal, nobody should harm anyone else's life, health, liberty, or their stuff.
But here is the major catch. While you are perfectly free, so is everyone else. And, as Locke points out, most people aren't exactly strict observers of equity and justice. So while you're free, your freedom is constantly in danger. Your life, your liberty, your possessions, all of it is totally vulnerable.
And this insecurity, this constant state of fears and continual dangers, that is precisely why people willingly choose to leave that state of nature. It's why we form governments. It's a trade-off, really.
Now, this next point is absolutely crucial. When Locke says we create government to protect our property, he doesn't just mean our land or our money. He has a much, much bigger definition. For Locke, your property is your life, your liberty, and your estates. It's the whole shebang. It's everything that makes you, you.
And this gets to the absolute heart of his argument. The one and only legitimate reason for any government to exist is to protect our property, our lives, our liberties, our possessions, way better than we could on our own. And if that idea sounds familiar to you, it should. It's basically the philosophical blueprint for the American Declaration of Independence.
More specifically, Locke says the state of nature is missing three critical things. First, there's no agreed-upon law that everyone knows and recognizes. Second, there's no neutral judge to settle arguments. And third, there's no power to actually enforce the law and punish people who break it. So we all agree to create a system that has all three of those things.
But, and believe me, this is a massive but, we don't just hand over all of our rights. The power we give to the government is strictly limited. It's conditional. Think of it less like a surrender and more like a very, very specific contract. This is the famous social contract. It is not a surrender, it's a delegation of power. We the people are basically lending our power to the government for one job and one job only, protecting our property. The government is our employee, not our master. Our most fundamental rights always stay with us.
And Locke lays out the terms of the contract very, very clearly. There are 4 rules that can't be broken. 1. The laws have to apply to everyone, rich and poor alike. 2. The laws have to be for the good of the people, not for the ruler's private benefit. 3. The government cannot take your property, through taxes, without your consent. And that one right there, that's the idea that became the famous rallying cry, no taxation without representation. And finally, the lawmakers can't just give their power away to someone else.
So, this leads to the most important question of all. What happens if the government breaks this contract? What if it violates these rules and starts working for itself instead of for the people?
Locke gives us this razor-sharp definition. He says the moment a ruler or a government acts outside the boundaries of the law, they are no longer a legitimate authority. At that moment, they become a tyrant. It's a bright, clear line in the sand.
He defines tyranny as using power not for the good of the public, but for the ruler's own private separate advantage. Basically, when a leader's ambition or greed becomes the law, that contract is broken, and the government has, in effect, declared war on its own people. And this, right here, this leads us to the most radical, the most world-changing part of Locke's entire argument, the ultimate check on a government that has become a tyranny.
So if the very government that was created to protect your life, liberty, and property starts to attack them instead, what's your recourse? What can the people actually do about it?
Locke's answer was an absolute earthquake. He argued that when a government breaks the social contract through tyranny, the power it was loaned doesn't just disappear into thin air. No, it goes right back to where it came from in the first place, back to the people.
And once that power has come back to the people, they have the absolute right to form a new government that will actually do the job it was supposed to do. This isn't just a right to complain or protest. This is the right to revolution. It's the foundational idea that it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish a government that has become destructive.
Locke's ideas literally formed the bedrock of modern democracy. They inspired freedom movements all across the globe. But they also leave us with a pretty profound question for our own time. He based all legitimate government on the consent of the people. So it's really worth asking ourselves, what does that consent actually look like today? And how do we make sure it's still the real foundation of power?